Hello and welcome back to the channel. On today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you how to cut a stylish bustier blouse with a V collar. If this is something you like, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button. So let's dive right into today's video. So first, here is my pattern paper and I'm going to go ahead to mark out my basic measurement. So I'm going to mark my shoulder to bust line, which is 9 inches, shoulder to waistline, which is 17 inches, and for my top length, you're going to place your tape and measure the desired top length that you want. So I'm using 8 inches after my waistline, and after I'm done doing that, I'll go ahead to remark all my measurements and I'm going to mark drawing a straight line. So after that, I'll just go ahead to label my pattern as bust line, waist, and my top length. So the next thing is to mark your shoulder divided by 2. So my shoulder is 14 divided by 2. I have 7 inches and I'll come down by 1 inch. So when I was actually marking, I mistakenly marked 7.5, which I'll correct later. So you're going to go ahead to mark a basic neckline of 3 by 1 inch, because for this pattern we are going to first of all start drafting from the back pattern. So after that, you're going to connect drawing your shoulder slope. So I'm going to go ahead to mark my chest line, and to find your chest line is your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5. So dividing mine and adding 1.5, I have 7 inches. So I'm going to go ahead to mark that 7 inches and I'm going to place my ruler to draw a straight line connecting. So after marking that 7 inches, the next thing is to go ahead to measure the distance from your new chest line to the bust point. After you're done marking that, you're simply going to place your ruler and you're going to draw a straight line. So after this, you're going to go ahead to divide your armhole into 2. So first, go ahead to mark your bust circumference divided by 4 on your chest line, and you're going to fold your armhole into 2 this way, and you're going to mark. So come out by ½ inch and you're going to go ahead to place your French curve connecting from your bust circumference down to the ½ inch you have at the armhole and at the upper part. So after that, I'll just go ahead to use my marker and I'll connect and mark out all the lines. So after I'm done doing this, the next step is just to go ahead to mark my dart intake for this pattern. So to do that, I'm going to place my tape starting from the starting point of this pattern paper, and I'll mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2. My nipple to nipple is 7 inches divided by 2. I have 3.5 inches. So I'll mark this all the way down to the lower part of my pattern, and I'm just going to go ahead to connect it back this way. So after I'm done connecting, this is what I have. So now I'm going to mark ½ inch on both sides, come down by 1 inch from my bust point, because to mark your dart intake is your shoulder to bust plus 1, and then you mark ½ inch on both sides of your pattern. So after that, I went ahead to connect, and from the top length I went up by 4 inches and I connected at this point. So after I was done connecting, the next step is to insert my body measurement. I marked my bust circumference divided by 4 and added my sewing allowance. At the waist, you're going to mark the waist circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake, replace, and you're going to add your sewing allowance. On the top length, you're going to go ahead to mark your hip circumference divided by 4 and mark your sewing allowance, because the dart did not get to that part of your pattern. Now you're going to place your curved rule or French curve, whatever you have. Go ahead to connect from the bust down to the waist and down to the top length of your pattern. So after you're done connecting this is what you're going to have for the basic back pattern. So now I don't really know what design is at the back of this dress, but we are just going to do something similar to what we have at the front part. So now I'm going to go ahead to divide this into 2. You can divide this into 2 or come out by 2 inches from your dart line. So either ways is okay. If you notice, I didn't even use my what I divided at that point. I went ahead to draw a straight line. At the upper part, I'm going to mark half of my armhole. My armhole is 7 inches divided by 2. I have 3.5, and from there I'll create a design for the back. And after that, I'm just going to go ahead to rule it out, and I'll be extending the style lines that I have on the pattern up to the upper part. So this is just to give the back pattern a little design, and I'll go ahead to mark out the rest of the pattern. Next, to make this blouse sit very well, I'm just going to go ahead to mark about ½ inch, and I'll connect it to the lower part and to the upper part. So if you notice on this pattern, I did not add a zip. So I feel when you're making this pattern, it's best to add your zipper allowance to the side. And another important point is to go ahead to measure the neckline of the back pattern. So after measuring it, I have 3.5. So if you use a basic neckline, most times you have 3.5 at the back. So for the back pattern of the dress, but you can go ahead to add zipper to the dress, but for me, if I'm making this pattern, I'll be adding zipper allowance to the side. So for that, you'll be using your sewing allowance to add a zip to the dress, and I'm just going to cut this out. But if you're not comfortable with that, just go ahead and add a zipper allowance to the back pattern of this dress. So I'll just go ahead to cut what I have on this part. So if you don't understand by what I mean by adding a zipper allowance to the side of the dress, you can just go ahead and leave your question at the comment section. So that zipper allowance that you have for this dress, instead of shaping it out on one side, you're going to add a zip to it, and the other side you will not add a zip. So I didn't really see the back pattern of this dress, so I'm just crafting this pattern with my own explanation. So after this is what the back pattern looks like, and we're going to go ahead to cut the front pattern. So go ahead to label this out. So for the front pattern of this dress, I've gone ahead to mark out the basic measurement just like we did for the front. Exactly what we did for the front. It's just that here we don't have a neckline. So for this, we'll be using a neckline of 3 by 7 inches for this pattern. So I won't be marking that out for now. We'll just go ahead to mark our basic pattern, basic bustier pattern, just like we did for the front. And I'm marking my nipple to nipple divided by 2. My nipple to nipple is 7 inches, or your bust span divided by 2. Mine is 7 inches divided by 2. You have 3.5 inches. So now I'm going to go ahead to rule a straight line connecting all those marks. That is the 3.5 inches mark up to the chest line. So after I'm done doing this, I'm just going to go ahead to mark my shoulder to bust, my shoulder to under bust, which is about 12 inches. So I didn't mark that when I was drafting this out because I forgot. So after marking my pattern, we are going to go ahead and mark our normal dart intake of 1 inch. For a plus size, go ahead and use 1.5 inches. So I'm just going to go ahead to mark this, and also at the top length. So we're using a straight dart for this pattern because of the design we have on the dress. So I'm just going to go ahead to connect this all the way down. After I'm done connecting, you can go ahead to place your French curve this way, or you can just turn it the other way. You're just going to have almost the same result. And I'm just going to connect from my bust down to my under bust, and I'm going to use my marker to mark this out to make it more visible for you to see. So after I'm done marking out this part, the next step is to work on the upper part of this pattern. So to do that, I'm just going to go ahead and come up by 2 inches. You can also come up by 2.5 inches. Sorry, you can use 2.5 inches. So after marking that 2 inches, I'm just going to go ahead to rule a line at that point. So this line will serve as a guide. Just like I marked my nipple to nipple divided by 2, which is 3.5, I'll also mark it at that point and connect. So now I'll be marking a dart intake of 1 inch on the both sides. So if you're a plus size, go ahead to also use 1.5. So I used 1 inch for mine, or you can go ahead to calculate it. I have a video on how to do that on my channel. So after I'm done doing that, I'm just going to go ahead to outline it, and also go ahead to adjust the bust part of my bustier this way. Next step is to go ahead to mark your bust circumference divided by 4. Mine is 33 divided by 4. I'll mark, measure the dart intake, replace and add my sewing allowance. At the under bust, I'll mark my under bust circumference divided by 4. Go ahead to measure the dart intake, replace it and add my sewing allowance. So for this pattern, if you're adding a zipper to the back, you're not supposed to use much allowance. So after marking your waistline, divide it by 4, measure the dart intake, replace and add your sewing allowance. Now at the top length, you're going to go ahead to mark your hip circumference divided by 4, and you're going to measure these 2 inches dart intake, replace it also, and you're going to mark your sewing allowance. So after I'm done doing this, I'm going to go ahead to use my curved rule, and I'm going to connect from the busts down to the under bust, from the under bust down to the waist, and also down to the top length of my pattern. So I went ahead to mark it out, and next we'll be working on the neckline. So I'll be using 3 inches by 7 inches. So I'll go ahead to mark, and after I'm done marking, I'm going to place my curved rule connecting from my neckline down to that 7 inches this way. So this is what I have after I'm done marking, and I'll use my marker to mark it out. So for the neckline, I'm going to connect from that point down to that 7 inches that I marked earlier, and from this part I will just go ahead to connect it down to the armhole point. So these 2 inches I marked here, I'm going to go ahead to replace it, because by the time you cut out the upper part and the lower part, it might not be meeting, it might not be the same again. So if you blend it out, like after that, after you're done cutting your pattern, you notice that it's going to meet up. So replace whatever that you took out from the darts. So after I'm done doing this, I'm just going to go ahead to outline it back. So now I'm just going to go ahead to divide here into 2. You can just come out by 2 inches, 2.5, or divide what you have here. So I'm just going to go ahead to connect it all the way up and draw a line connecting it down. So after this, I'll just go ahead to mark out all the lines and mark out also the upper part and indicate the area for the eyelet. So I'll just go ahead to cut out my pattern, and with this, if you haven't yet subscribed, please don't forget to hit on the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to leave your comment at the comment section. So after cutting out this part, if you blend it, you notice that it is actually meeting. So I'll just cut out the rest of the pattern, and we'll go ahead to cut out the collar of this dress. So now I'm just going to go ahead to first of all mark few inches in front, which will enable me mark out the neckline. So you can just use 3 or 4 inches depending on the size of the collar that you want, or if not, you can just mark your collar together with your pattern. So after marking out that line, I'm just going to place and mark 7 inches. Remember, the neckline we have in front is about 7 inches. So you're going to go ahead to rule out that 7 inches line, and I'm going to go ahead to connect, drawing a straight line. So next, I'm going to mark out that basic neckline of 3 inches, just like we marked at the front, and from that point I'm just going to connect, drawing out the same V neckline, but to make sure I'm in order, I'll measure that 7 inches. So after I'm done drawing this out, so remember the back neckline we measured was 3.5. I'll slant my tape a little and I'll connect, measuring 3.5. Make sure you have 3.5. So from that 3.5 line at the back, I'll go out by ½ inch. This is to make sure that the collar sits very well at the back of the dress, and I'm just going to connect it back this way. So now we are going to go ahead to draw out our neckline, and I'll outline this. So if you don't really understand, all we did was to mark our front neckline of 3 by 7 inches v-neck, and then connect our neckline of the back of 3.5 inches, because we are going to be cutting the collar together. So from that line I drew, I'm going to come down by 2 inches. So from that mark I made, I'm going to go ahead and come out by 2.5 inches, and I'm going to connect it down this way. So after I'm done connecting, I'm just going to mark about 1 inch inward this way, and I'll go up by 1/2 inch and I will connect it, and from there I'll take that 2.5 inches up. I'll continue marking the 2.5 inches till I get to the last part, that is the 3.5 inches on that part. So when you're cutting this, you can cut it on fold, or you can just cut it into 2 pieces and join it back. So here is the collar, and I'll go ahead to cut it out. So after cutting it out, I'll go ahead and place it with my pattern. Go ahead to just make the point for the eyelet. Go ahead and make or create the dots or the part for the eyelet on the dress. So for the sleeve of this dress, you're going to cut it out, but you're not going to be sewing it together. You're just going to attach the armhole a little and then use the eyelet to hold it down. So here we are going to go ahead to cut a basic sleeve, and this is a pattern I have already. Go ahead to measure your armhole, round your armhole circumference, divide it by 2, and you'll be adding your sewing allowance. So for this particular dress, you're going to be turning it up with your lining, and go ahead to mark 1/2 inch for joining allowance or turn up allowance at the upper part. So you're just going to draw out that line, and the next step you want to take is to go ahead and mark your sleeve cap height. To get that is your bust circumference divided by 12 plus 0.5 inches or 1/2 inch. So next, you're going to go ahead to mark your shoulder to elbow point. Mine is around 13 inches, and this is my sleeve length. So my sleeve length is around 21 to 22 inches. So next, what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead to measure the armhole of the dress that you're working with, or you're going to mark your armhole circumference at that point, and after that you're going to go ahead to measure it and make sure that is the exact measurement. So on the elbow point, you're going to measure your elbow circumference divided by 2 and add your sewing allowance. At the lower part, which is your wrist, measure your wrist circumference and add your sewing allowance. After that, go ahead to cut out your basic sleeve allowance. So now you're going to be creating the eyelet part at the upper part of this pattern, just like we have on the video. So if you have any question concerning this tutorial, please leave your question at the comment section, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and also add your turn up or joining allowance on top.